This is a video presentation on the importance of food in the short story The Third and Final Continent, written by John-Paul Lahira on the history of cornflakes. Here we will introduce you to the main statements about the food that have appeared in the story and how it came to the events that are related to cornflakes and how it all affects the story. Further, we will tell you something about the history of cornflakes. At the end, we are going to ask you 3 questions that you have to answer, so please pay close attention and listen carefully. In the beginning of the story, the narrator just arrived in England and left his home country India. There he lives under relatively bad conditions, considering he shared a room with 3 or 4 other people and there only was one toilet. As expected, his eating habits there matched his living situation. He ate pots of egg curry with his bare hands off and a table covered with newspapers and drank tea. In this part, the narrator is telling the reader that the narrator himself is holding on to his old eating habits by basically only eating the Indian food. Also, the missing of reliability in what he eats and how he eats shows that he is relatively unorganized and doesn't really care about the conditions he is living in. After his time in England, he travels to America and spends his first night at Absalom MCA, where cooking is strictly forbidden. Because of that, the narrator relies on only eating cornflakes with milk and some bananas for weeks. Later in the story, the narrator's milk goes sour, and also mentionable is that the process of the milk is new to him, since he always got them delivered to his doorstep in England. This shows that although he's really unexperienced in American culture, he's really open to new things. The narrator still doesn't really care about his living conditions on the food that he eats and is spending as little time as possible on his food, which is also shown by the sour of milk. When the narrator moves to a new flat where he is allowed to use the kitchen, he is still eating cornflakes with milk. There he is expecting his recently married wife, Maya, who has to fly over from India to America and who has told him that he can cook. When Maya arrives, she gives the narrator Indian darling tea, while he has some egg curry prepared for her arrival, which they eat with bare hands. This is the first time in the US that the narrator is eating with bare hands again, since he only eat cornflakes with a spoon up to that point. While he is at work, Maya is cooking steamed rice and in the morning prepares traditional Indian breakfast for him. But the narrator tells Maya that he would rather continue eating cereals in the morning. One day, Maya goes out to buy new cooking utensils to cook traditional chicken curry. In this part of the story, it really becomes clear that the narrator is not strictly holding to his old traditions. Even though he wouldn't have to cook for himself, he still chooses American cereal over Indian breakfast. However, they still like to do some traditionally Indian stuff, which is shown by Maya cooking chicken curry at the very end of the story. The end of the story also really points out how the narrator, throughout his whole traveling, isn't really able to independently take care for himself. Only when Maya is living with him, he's starting to eat normal meals and have a bit of variety in his diet. But how important is the food in this short story, The Third and Final Continent? Food actually doesn't really play an important role in the plot or the outcome of the story. However, it gives a deeper look into the main character and tells us things like his missing independency to properly cook for himself. Furthermore, his trip from India to England to the US is also represented by what he eats. He drinks tea while he's in England and eats cornflakes with milk while he's in the US. Lastly, the food also tells us something about the character's background and also his traditions, like when the narrator can only cook egg curry for himself, or when Maya, without questioning, prepares him Indian breakfast and cooks while he's at work. These things tells us that the narrator is the most likely used to getting his food made by a woman and Maya is used to cooking food for a man. Let's now take a look at the history of cornflakes. John Harvey Kellogg was an American physician, one of the inventors of peanut butter, and along with his brother Will Keith Kellogg, is considered to be a inventor of cornflakes. His studies were paid for by his parents James and Ellen White, both founding members of the Adventists. They owned the Health Reform Institute at Battle Creek, founded in 1866. In 1875, Kellogg received his doctorate in medicine and soon thereafter took over the medical director of the institute. Kellogg's system of biologic living advocated vegetarianism, regular exercise, plenty of fresh air and sunshine, drinking 8 to 10 glasses of water a day, and abstinence from alcohol, tobacco, tea, and coffee. He also saw alcohol as an evil of stupendous proportions, contrary to popular belief back then, thought that alcohol was a poison. From 1874, Kellogg was also editor of the monthly Adventist magazine Health Reformer, in which he published numerous articles of his own. In the same year, Kellogg published his first book entitled Proper Diet for a Man, in which he propagated a vegetarian diet. In 1879, he changed the name from Health Reformer to Good Health. In 1877, the book Plain Facts About Sexual Life followed, also gave numerous of lectures on health and nutrition. John Harvey and Will Kellogg founded the Senator's Food Company in year 1897 in Battle Creek, which produced the famous cornflakes. Kellogg always provided for health and sexual abstinence, and he rejected masturbation, which he blamed for various diseases in which children had to be systematically prevented from doing. He believed that sex weakens the human body and recommended to people the routine circumcisions of small boys, since the increased insensitivity of the glands prevents self-satisfaction. Kellogg himself lived in complete sexual abstinence. After Will Keith started adding sugar to his cornflakes in 1906, the brothers fought over it and never spoke to each other again. Kellogg was convinced that most diseases were ultimately caused by self-poisoning of the body, so he opted for an alternative diet that he believed would radically detoxify mind and body. Now finally come the questions. Here we will see if you have really been paying attention. If you have problems while thinking, you can always stop the video and think briefly. The first question of the quiz is, what process was new to the narrator when he came to America? The correct answer is the process of buying milk. Our second question is, what did John Harvey Kellogg invent besides cornflakes? The answer of question number 2 is peanut butter. The final question is, what was the reason the two Kellogg brothers split and parted ways? The answer of the last question is, they were debating over putting sugar on the cornflakes. Were you able to answer all the questions? If so, then you people are really good listeners. If you liked the video, then please give it a thumbs up. Of course, we also look forward to your comments.